All right, happy Halloween. In the spirit of the season, I feel like I should be telling you about horror stories with tenants and rentals and how your property will get destroyed. But as exciting as that video is, that just really hasn't been my experience, and to the best of my knowledge, it hasn't been any of my clients' experience. Not nearly as scary as people make it out to be. So what is this video going to be about? This video is going to be about short-term rentals, medium-term rentals, and long-term rentals, the pros and cons of each model, when you would use one model over another, and some of the feedback I've been hearing on my consulting calls about people's concerns around those different models, when they would want to approach them, when they wouldn't. Also the money. This is coming up in the comments of these videos. Is it even worth it to do a medium-term rental? And we'll address that as well. My name is Erin Spradlin. I co-own Erin and James Real Estate. We are based out of Denver and Colorado Springs, and we also work in the metro areas of both of those cities. We work with sellers, buyers, and investors, and typically those investors are in the medium or short-term space. If you like this content, a like and subscribe is always appreciated. We have lots more content like it. So we have a website, Erin and James Real Estate. Again, we're active real estate agents, so that is updated frequently, and that is the best way to reach us, and I will link to that below. We have TikTok and Instagram. I'll add links for that. And then we have a weekly podcast that's a 3-part series. It's relevant not just if you're in Colorado. Some of it is relevant if you're not just in Colorado. It comes out weekly. It's about 15 minutes. It's quick and easy. I think I said TikTok and Instagram. And I'm doing consulting right now. So if you want me to look at your property, look at your listing, you just want to talk to someone about any of the rental strategies, really, I can talk to you about long-term, medium-term, or short-term. I will say my husband has a little bit more of a focus on short-term. I have a little bit more of a focus on medium-term, but we can run the cash calculators for any of those, and both of us know it well. And it's $100 for an hour-long call. If you are looking for a comprehensive guide on medium-term rentals, how to set them up, checklists on it, interviews from both the tenant and the landlord side, it's all in this book, which I wrote. It's available on Amazon. It's called American Nomads, and if you just search Erin Spradlin, it should come right up. Okay, not to be totally basic about it, but let's just talk about definitions really quickly. Short-term rental is a rental that is furnished, and it is typically for fewer than 30 days. And a lot of times people are sourcing this off of Airbnb. You might also use booking.com or vrbo for it. But typically the renters that come in are renting between 2 and 3 days to up to a week, depending on what your property is and where it's located. Might be families, might be individuals. But the key to this is that it's fewer than 30 days and it's furnished. A medium-term rental is a furnished property, but you rent it for 30 days or more. In the past, it had been called the traveling nurse model. Now we're starting to see it being called extended stays, the midterm model, the medium-term model. There's also a counterculture that's coming around this called bleisure, which is business and leisure travel, business and leisure. I've gone through this before in a video. I don't like saying the word bleisure or bleisure. Nomads, all of those are feeding into this medium-term rental, which is basically like you're going to go somewhere, you're going to stay for a little bit, and you're going to work for a while because you're no longer tethered to your job because of remote work. But in the past, it had typically been thought of as a model for traveling nurses. They were coming into work at hospitals. They needed somewhere to stay. But the key with medium-term rentals is it's 30 days or more and it's furnished. And that is with the city, with the HOA, you want to check to make sure that 30 days is their threshold. And then for long-term rentals, it is going to be 30 days or more per the city. Per an HOA, it's probably 90 days or more. You're not going to furnish it, and this is more the typical rental model that people have done in the past. I like to talk about long-term sometimes because I feel like people have gotten so used to short-term rental money and the appeal of short-term rental money that they blanch at a long-term rental and no longer think it's a good investment. I hear this, but long-term rentals existed and only existed basically up until 2014, 2015. So I still think it's a solid investing strategy, and it will also bring me up to a different point that I'll discuss in the future, which is appreciation. But a long-term rental again, so you're renting it for 30 days or more and you're renting it unfurnished. Okay, so on that point, let's talk about what you would cover. For short-term rental, you are covering the mortgage if you paid for a loan, you're paying for insurance, you're paying probably the cost of whatever platform that you're listing it on. You are paying for the utilities, and you have to pay for the furniture. Those are kind of the key items that you have to pay for. Medium term is very similar. So you're gonna have to pay for the platform, you have to pay for the mortgage, you have to pay for insurance, you have to pay for utilities, and you're gonna have to pay for the furniture. So those two sections. The big difference here is whether or not you would bring on property management, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And then long term, you're going to pay for your mortgage, you're going to pay for your insurance, they're going to pay for the furniture, they're going to pay for the utilities, all of that stuff. Okay, so high level, let's talk about when you would use a short-term rental. You would use a short-term rental when money is your maximum goal and you are going to manage it yourself. Let's talk about property management. So with short-term rentals are a ton of work, especially if you're out of state. And so you're probably going to want to put a property manager on that, or after a while you burn out and end up wanting a property manager if you're constantly doing short-term rentals. The reason for this is because they're flipping every 3 or 4 days. Guests have a level of expectation about the communication. You have to have cleaners in and out, and you have to be stocking it constantly. So, and property management can charge anywhere between 15 to 35% in kind of the urban or rural areas. I've seen in the mountains as high as 50% on it. So you have to think about that with your cost evaluation. For medium term and long term, I recommend not using property management. And the reason for that is long term is 8 to 12% typically for property managers to come in. Medium term, I feel like I'm seeing about the same, maybe 8 to 15%. But I just happen to personally believe that medium term and long term are so easy these days now because of smart locks and just getting a relationship with a cleaner. Your turnover for a medium term is every 2 to 3 months, and your turnover for a long term is every 6 months to a year. So to me, to have someone else take that money when it's really easy to source clients these days because of different rental sites like Zillow and Airbnb and Furnish Finder and stuff, that I just don't think it's worth it to pay for a property manager. I think they're also just not as motivated as you're going to be, and I just don't find the work to be so much that you need a property manager on it. So let's talk high level, the pros and cons of short-term rentals. So the pro is obviously you're going to make the most money if you manage it yourself. You are not going to make the most money potentially if you have a property manager on it. So that is pro number one, make the most money. Pro number two, I have lots of clients that want to live in Colorado eventually, or they want to vacation in Colorado consistently. So this is a way to have your money working for you. You purchase the property and somebody either pays, you either come out even or you come out above, or you only pay 100 or 200 under each month, but you have a property that's appreciating in Colorado. Your ability to use the property is another attractive feature of short-term rentals. And then finally, you have shorter tenants. So that also dovetails with what I was just mentioning, but the benefit of that, not just that you can use the property yourself, but also that if you have a problem tenant, that problem tenant is just a problem tenant for a weekend or for 4 days or for a week. Whereas if you rent out for months or many months on end, you are going to have to deal with the neighbors being unhappy with that tenant, you maybe not having access to that property, them trashing the property, etc. But again, as I said up top, I do not know a lot of people that have been unhappy with their tenants, either long-term, medium-term, or short-term. I think that is a nightmare situation that we hear about in the news because that's an interesting story versus all the bland ones that normally go well. But high level, the pros, the money, the ability to use it, and then also the fact that your tenants are in and out. So if you have a problem tenant, they're gone. Cons of a short-term rental are the property management costs. So they can be as much as 50% in the mountains. Typically for urban areas, it's between 15 and 30%. They are a business that has a lot of different clients, and so basically they're just trying to put heads in beds, but they're not necessarily managing it as well as you could. So that's property management. And also with that, sometimes you'll meet people, they get a recommendation from someone else that's so happy with the Airbnb property management or service, but then that group tries to scale, and when they try to scale, they get watered down because all of a sudden they don't have as strong of employees or they've taken on too much work. So, however, if you manage the property on your own, it is a lot of work. I always say it's good money, but it's not free money. It's not easy money. It can be quite demanding. And then you're dealing with bookings, you're dealing with cleaners, you're dealing with handymen, you are having to answer questions, really dumb questions, by the way, sometimes like, how do I get to your house from the airport? And it's like, I can look it up in Google just as easily as you can. I know everybody that owns a short-term rental knows exactly what I'm talking about on that point. But anyways, so it's a lot of work. So property management costs you a lot. If you do it yourself, it's a lot of work. So those are the downsides. And then the final downside is just that if your city or your HOA changes their laws and they prohibit 30-day or more rentals, then all of a sudden you have a property that is sitting there that you've paid for all the furniture on, and you're officially outside of the law. And in some cities, this might not be that big of a deal. They might not have the compliance to do it. In general, it's not that big of a deal as long as you don't piss off your neighbors. It's not like the city is going around looking for you. It's normally neighbor complaints that tip them off. But if you do get a neighbor, and a lot of neighbors don't like short-term rentals, if you get a neighbor that complains, then again, you have this property. And many cities do take it seriously. Like Denver is the only city in the country that pursues felonies against people that lie, but more and more cities are requiring you to sign an affidavit, or they're putting on stricter rules around it. So it's not necessarily something that you want to think you're just going to coast under the radar on, because you might not. And if you don't, you've made an investment for something that you can't support. All right, so let's talk about medium-term rentals and what the pros and cons are there. So a medium-term rental, to me, a pro is that you don't have to work as hard. So you typically come in, your first week of taking over that property is a lot of work. You have to furnish it, which is true for Airbnb or a short-term rental. You have to find tenants. That is true for a short-term rental, because you can find those tenants either on Furnish Finder or Airbnb. So the process for that is very similar. But then you install the tenants, and then you don't have to worry about them for a minimum of a month, but a lot of them renew their lease. So I really like them in that way, because you are making above market rent. 30% is a safe, conservative number above market rent, in my opinion. They're coming in, you're not really hearing from them, they're not very demanding, and a lot of times they renew that rent, continue to have that elevated rent, and they're staying in there, but you're really not hearing from them. You can check on the property, you can use the property. Again, if you're someone that's outside of Colorado that wants to use the property, you could mark it off for a month and then bump in and use it for that space. I like medium term for that, so not as much work, more money. And then also, in my opinion, you don't need a property manager, because it's really a smart lock and a relationship with a handyman and a cleaner, and hopefully you're not talking to that handyman or that cleaner that often, because your tenants are in there. You can also write your lease in a way so that the tenants have to deal with the cleaning and with the handyman. So you're really stepped back from that in a way that you can't with short-term rentals. And then finally, compliance with the city and with HOAs. So the laws, at least on the city level, are not going to change for fewer than 30 days. So you're probably going to be safe in that way. You're still going to want to check with your HOA, because HOAs sometimes require 60 days or 90 days. I've said this before. Sorry, I'm looking at my dog. And then a final point why I like medium-term rentals is that we're starting to see more and more demand for this as people travel the country. That is why the subtext or the subtitle of my book is remote workers, and it's why I call it American Nomads in general, is that I think this digital nomad piece that you've seen, you're going to see more and more in the US as people are vacationing. They want to work from their vacation, or they want to explore different cities that they want to live in, but they want to spend time in different cities before committing to that. And so medium-term rental is a really good fit for that, and we're just seeing the demographic grow and grow. Okay, and then finally, let's talk about the pros and cons of a long-term rental. The main pro about a long-term rental is that it's not a lot of work. You source it, you put a renter in, hopefully they renew, they're responsible for the utilities, they're responsible for everything, and you have an ongoing relationship with that person. What I usually say about long-term rentals is it's the least amount of money and the least amount of work. Some drawbacks to it, obviously, are the least amount of money. Also the fact that if you don't like the tenant, they're there for a long time, but it just depends on what your goals are. I think that people, earlier when I was talking about it and saying short-term rental is the most money, I think sometimes people would be like, well, duh, then that's the one I'm going to pick. But it's complicated, and some people just want an investment that sits there that they don't think about, like the stock market. And I think people should think about real estate more being like the stock market, in the sense that not every stock you get is the best stock that you'll ever get. What you want to avoid is buying a stock that immediately tanks. It's the same thing with a house. You want to buy a house or a property that is a decent investment that you, depending on your goals, can sit back and ignore, and that it will appreciate over time. And also, people don't like to hear the appreciation argument, because I think there's been a lot of education about why it needs to be cash flow and you should ignore appreciation. But in a market like mine, that just does not make sense. When people were making $50,000 to $100,000 year over year, 9%, 12% or year over year on these properties, you really don't care about $200 in cash flow when it's a $600,000 property and you're potentially going to make $60,000 in a year on it, or maybe in 6 months. So you know, in that way, it's like, I think cash flow is not unimportant, but it's not the end all be all. If you're looking at appreciation, is your appreciation better than what you think you can get in the stock market? I think sometimes that's a relevant argument, but I'm not a money manager and I'm not squeezing those numbers. I'm just saying a lot of times to my clients, if your goal is to live in Colorado, or if your goal is to acquire your first investment and you're feeling nervous about it, let's look at, 4 to 5 properties and pick the one that does best across whatever metric you care about most. And is it that you want to come on vacation? Is it that you want to make the most money? Is it that you want something that you can sit on and use occasionally? It just depends. And I think it's obnoxious when people act like money is the only goal. It's obviously the primary goal for a lot of people. But a lot of people don't want to stress about their investment, and a lot of people just want something that sits there, they can utilize, and that they can make money on. And so I think that is important. With that in mind, I know some people are saying in the comments, well, if I have to pay for the utilities and I only have a 30% markup and blah, 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 it might not even be worth my while. You might be right on that. I had a client or a consultant client come in the other day. He had bought his house in 2014 or something, so he had a really low mortgage on it. He was going to have no problem making the mortgage and probably making more than $1,000 on that mortgage. And in that case, I didn't really think a medium or a short-term rental made a lot of sense for him, for the amount of work and then having to pay the utilities and stuff, and the difference between what he'd make on a medium term versus just charging someone to be on a long term. I thought it made more sense for that property to be long term. Also, because his property was a 5-4 that fed into a really good school district, it's like you can command a lot of money for that, and there's a lot of people that probably want a 5-4 that goes into a good school district where you don't have to put out the money for the furniture or anything else, versus how many people actually want a medium term rental for 1, 2, 3 months for a 5-4 that feeds into a school district. So I think you have to look at your circumstances, analyze it, look at the numbers. I do 30% just as a conservative markup, but you also could go on Furnish Finder or Airbnb and see what people are renting for and what their markups are, and that will give you a better sense of whether or not it makes sense to use that model or a different model. And again, just to beat a dead horse, don't let anyone else define your goals for you. If you just care about getting an investment that you can eventually use or that will appreciate over time, that's what you need to worry about. Just because someone else wants to manage their own property and be on top of it constantly and live in that area, that's for them, that's not for you. And sometimes I feel like people get very hung up on that, or they just feel this pressure of like, I gotta have the best investment possible. It's like, you gotta have the best investment for you, and be clear on that. All right, I'll get off my soapbox. Happy Halloween, everybody. I hope you're out doing something fun. I'm about to go to happy hour, and I will video with you again soon. Thanks again. Bye.